Well, this just in, a denser Australia could be the solution to the affordability crisis we are facing in Perth, according to this report here that was seen on the news a couple of days ago. As you can see here, it's pretty much going through the land size by city. So we're looking at Sydney, which has, according to this, 20 of the most expensive suburbs via the price per square metre, with only a 4.6 land size reduction in the past 10 years. Perth, as the example, is a very strong outlier, being a 20% land reduction for new housing blocks overall. So digesting this data, it's a clear indication that Australia as a whole is loosely going towards more smaller blocks than increased block sizes. Some of the main reasons for that, especially if you're looking out in the Perth area, is the supply of new land estates that are in desirable locations close to the coast within a viable destination distance from the CBD. Is to give enough established housing and new home supply, they need to make all these homes on smaller blocks, and that obviously helps out with the costs for building, because obviously smaller homes and then the overall package overall is cheaper, which is obviously great news. But it still circles back to that question of, does creating a more higher density Australia actually help with the affordability issues that are currently facing major cities in Australia? The short answer is I don't really think so. The main reason for this is it's still location specific that's going to be trumping major increases to the housing supply, which is why over the next 10 to 30 years, the best performing areas from property value increases are going to be in the desirable locations that can't be cookie cutter repeated and can't easily be got into by getting land in the surrounds or subdividing blocks down and demolishing blocks to build either high-rise or multi-door homes on the one block. The caveat to all that is obviously in the future, especially if pressures come on to government regulations, both at the federal and state level, is if you change certain zoning laws that allow these bigger development projects to take place in established suburbs that would warrant a house being sold and then a development site being built on to bring more people in at scale, that won't have a huge impact, but that will have a knock-on effect to those established suburbs where affordability will be a little bit easier if the land size and building sizes overall of these houses in desirable locations are smaller. Looking though at a long-term horizon, if you're looking to maybe make a purchase in the next year or so, should you be looking for land size that is above or below the average land size by that city? So again, if we revisit back to Perth as the example, currently in 2023, we're at average lot size of 480 square meters. If you're looking at an investment opportunity, all things being equal, and the land size, one was below and one was above with the same style of house and everything on it, again, all things being equal, very hard to make that just pure comparison. It's going to be better to invest your money into the block that has the larger block overall. A couple of questions that come off the back of that is, if they're in the same location, then it's obsolete, but the better location that you can afford to get into, that's still going to be the best option for yourself long term. But if you're looking at getting into the market in something that's on a smaller block that isn't in a desirable location, or a larger block that is in a desirable location, which one did you put your attention to? Naturally, I'd lean towards the one that has the bigger block that's in a better location. And then the reverse of that is also true. If there was a house that's on a smaller block in a better location, I'd be personally looking at that as an investment, but also as a first-time homeowner purchase as well, with most other factors being equal. And the main reason for that is, especially if holding periods are going to be longer, which I think is very realistic due to the affordability of houses at the moment. You're not going to see as often people buying and selling homes, especially if it's their owner occupier, as years gone by. So if you want to end up stretching your first time purchase or one of your first few investment portfolio purchases, the location is going to be what trumps all, and sacrificing a little bit of land will naturally result in a better long-term outcome. Even if the age-old adage quote of the house depreciates, the land appreciates in value long-term, it's still specific to the location that you're in. And if the affordability allows you to get a smaller house and a smaller block in a desirable location that has better metrics to perform over the long term than a large house, large block in a less desirable location, again, with all things being close to equal, the smaller block and the smaller land, as long as it's green titled with the right zoning specifications that come with it, that's where I'd be putting my focus towards in the short, medium, and long term for any next purchase you're looking at doing. Again, I do have to caveat this that if you're watching, it's not strictly investment advice. This is just where I'm looking at if I was to personally do some research into my next purchase again, which is what I'm actively doing. These are the questions that I like to ask, and it's just the things I personally consider and discuss when I'm speaking with people that are looking to make their next purchase in the Perth precinct, especially because this data really heavily showcases where Perth is heading overall. We're never going to be an area that goes away from the coast, but we are going to be an area that over the long term is going to have much smaller blocks, subdivisions happening in certain coastal suburbs at a quite high rate, and also new block builds in coastal suburbs are much more on the smaller side than they are on the larger side. Final note that will potentially affect the rest of Australia as well, but most notably Perth. If you look at when an established home is on a large block and then the house that's on it is, say, a 4x2, if you look at the internal floor plan size, it can be closely comparable to now a better location suburb with a smaller block and a house that is comparable floor plan that is trading off a smaller frontage and a smaller backyard, which again, long term, if you're looking at where's the areas that you live in most, if those areas via a more modernized floor plan, or just overall the scope of the floor plan in terms of the internal living spaces are just better accommodating, again, that's going to be what will hold value, and not necessarily the building itself appreciate, but the lifestyle that house provides will appreciate in value long term, because it won't need restoration and remodeling because it already hits the parameters that will service the short, medium, and long term. Now, we can't predict if what's in now is going to be in 40 years' time. Like, you look at these 1970s, 80s, and early 2000 builds as well that have the bathrooms and kitchens that, not due to structural reasons, but just due to appeal, need remodeling. We've just gone through one of those ourselves. But especially if it's more neutral and plain toned and just standardized from what's just been in trend through architectural relevancy over the last 50 to 60 years, they're better safe bets to make when looking to make your next purchase in Perth or the surrounds of Australia. So to summarise what we sort of just discussed, if Australia continues to go in a more higher density scope in terms of new builds, but also rezoning via federal and local governments, state governments as well, to allow subdivisions and more developments to come into certain areas that will allow more smaller blocked housing in desirable locations, will that help the affordability? Marginally and location specific, yes, but in a grand scheme of things, likely not, because supply is still going to trump the supply-demand curve is still going to trump at the end of the day. Secondary to that, if you're looking to make a purchase in the next 12, 18, 24 months, all things being equal, location still trumps number one, especially because long-term, just where societal abilities are going, less likely that people are going to be selling and moving as frequently as years gone by. Obviously, there's generational jumps with this, but if we're looking at this sort of generation from 25 to 35, I feel like the average time in home will be longer, and then the average properties that one person has in their overall portfolio might actually increase, but in terms of the turnover rates of those homes will probably be lower for a multitude of reasons, but obviously just the affordability and serviceability to go out and get multiple homes is just becoming increasingly more difficult and less likely for the average Australian investor homeowner. So if you watched this far, I just recommend subscribing to my channel. We're going to be going into a lot more detail over the next couple of weeks to months about specifics relating to first-time purchases in the Perth market, or just the next purchase that you have in the Perth market overall. Any questions that come off this or thoughts, the comment section is open and I'll respond to each and every one that comes through. I'm Thomas Whitford. Thanks for watching today.